National Trust is famous worldwide for its stunning properties, but its gardens and its landscapes are equally spectacular. I'm Jane Moore, and in this new series with the National Trust's official partner STIHL, I'll be going behind the scenes to find out just what it takes to manage these amazing spaces. Today, I'm here at Mottisfont in the south of England, where I'll be looking at a winter garden that has been specially planted for colour and vibrancy at this time of the year. A riverside habitat that is being carefully managed for wildlife. And we'll be going behind the scenes to see what it takes to look after a world-renowned rose garden. But first, let's meet the head gardener, Rob. So Rob, Mottisfont has had quite a history, hasn't it?
It has indeed. The site has been occupied since the 13th century. There was a priory here until Henry VIII disillusioned the monasteries.
Oh yes, did his thing, yes.
Yeah, and then it all passed into family hands, really.
Right.
There was monastery gardens here, which obviously are no longer here, but the various families that have lived on the site have influenced what we have here, and it's very much a romantic garden now.
Yes, it's lovely, isn't it? And it's had quite a lot of different garden designers that have worked on it in the more recent history.
It has indeed. The Lime Avenue we just walked down was a Geoffrey Jellicoe design. He had a much bigger design for the garden, but only part of it was implemented.
But there's also other designers, maybe not household names, but names that gardeners, often reference, people like Russell Page and Norah Lindsay, I believe.
Yeah, Norah Lindsay had quite an influence on the gardens here. She designed the parterre on the other side of the house, and she also designed some of the borders which now form part of the rose garden.
Ah, and that's what she's quite famous for, is her borders and things, isn't it? But the person that I always tend to remember or think about in association with Mottisfont is Stuart Thomas.
That's right. Stuart Thomas was absolutely instrumental in the gardens here. He introduced the world famous rose collection, and he had a real passion for these roses and wanted to ensure their future, because they actually weren't very popular at the time.
Right, I think that was in about in the 1970s, wasn't it?
Correct, yeah.
And I believe that some of these roses were really out of fashion. They just were not popular at all.
No, not at all, not at all. But we have them here today, thanks to him, really.
And now people come from all over the world to see them.
They did, yeah.
Including me. And I'm just about to go and see Michael and see what he's up to pruning-wise. The walled garden at Mottisfont is one of its most famous features, but the national collection of old roses that are contained within it are world-renowned. I'm about to meet Michael, who looks after them. Hi, Michael.
Hello.
Lovely to meet you.
You too, you too.
And it's great to be here and see this huge collection of roses.
Yes, absolutely. So we in this rose garden have one of the most important collection of roses, where we have some of the rarest varieties of roses in the UK. So they've all come all across the world in the 1970s when Stuart Thomas brought all the collection together.
Right. And how many roses have you actually got?
So we've got 417 varieties in the national collection, and just over 1,000 roses altogether, which all need pruning in different ways.
I'm going to say that's a lot of pruning.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
So here's one that needs a good prune by the look of it.
Yeah, this is. So this is a lovely rambler that we have across what we call a 3D structure. And it does need a prune and a haircut. So the first phase we would do is actually start looking at taking off all the short growth out of the rose. So the bits like this, where it's really nice and short, would prune back to 2 buds. So you'd look along the rose, back to 2 buds, and cut it off. So we'd do that, and we'd do it all across the rose just to see where the structure is.
Just to clear the decks.
Absolutely. And then we'd look at the dead and diseased and just take bits of that out.
That's the classic 3Ds, isn't it? Yes. The dead, diseased, damaged. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So then once we've got that, we'll see all the structure, and we'll see what's going on with the rose in its entirety. And then what we'd look at is looking at seeing parts of the rose that we could take out, which is the older growth, and replacing it with the new.
Right.
The reason being is the older growth doesn't flower as well as the newer growth. So actually tying in the newer growth into the rose is a lot better. So bits like this here, for instance, is all the newer growth coming from the base of the rose.
See, it's lovely fresh green, isn't it?
So we'd go all across the rose, pruning it, and we'll try and get it looking really, really smart and
Yeah.
really tidy. So it's,
But you must still end up with a lot of stems, so you've still got to thin them out a bit.
you do. So again, we'll try and tie those in, but if we can't, we'll then spur prune them, and that's exactly the same again. You take off down to 2 buds. The reason being is that actually what it will do is it will still flower, it still branch out, but it will just keep the structure that you're after in the rose.
Right. And then when you're tying them in, you don't tie them in just straight up, do you?
No.
You're sort of weaving them round.
No, what we try to do is actually bend the stems. So a nice gentle curve around the side of the rose and around the side of the structure. The reason being is actually when the sap and the energy comes from the base of the rose during the winter into the spring, it will rise up into the plant, and actually all the energy will want to come onto the curve of the rose. And so then all the flowers will then come straight up on the top of the bend and then last a lot longer.
Right, so you get more flower.
Yes. Just for something just so simple as just curving the stems when you tie them in.
And this is what the finished article will look like, isn't it?
Absolutely. So this is one we did earlier. And the idea is that, again, as I said, is having that right structure. It's having that even balance so that we have as much coverage as possible across this structure. So that when we have it all in flower, you'll see all the flowers right across the rose. As you can see here, we have bent the stem just gently. It's a gentle bend, but as you can see here, the sap will come up and it will all flower and it all come upwards, and it will just be absolutely laden.
And I can see what you're saying about the little spurs and things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where all the old flowering stems were. So we've taken all of those down to 2 buds, and then it will flower again, and then we'll just work along it and just make sure. So it's beautiful structure now, and it's exactly the way we should train it. It seems very daunting, but actually once you look at it in phases and take it by phases, by taking off all the flowering stems first, and then taking all the dead and diseased and dying out, and then once you got that, it makes it a lot easier to tie in all the longer bits and trying to do it. So it's absolutely fantastic.
It's a lot of work though, isn't it? How long
Yes.
does it take to go from that to this?
This takes a good day and a half per person, so it does take a while, but actually it's totally worth it. And then when a member of the public comes to see the garden, they'll see this beautiful pruning, so it adds just a little bit of extra when somebody comes and sees it in the winter.
Oh, well, that leads me on to my next location then, which is the winter garden.
Yes, absolutely. Let me show you.
Rose gardens are not the most exciting in winter, but this winter garden has been planted specially with lots of winter interest plants that really show you how to make the most of your garden through these dark winter months. And Tracy here looks after it. Hi,
Hello.
Tracy. Will you give me a little bit of a tour of your winter garden and tell me about some of your favourite plants?
Yeah, of course. Some of the scented plants are my favourite. We've got witch hazels, there's the winter flowering honeysuckle and the daphnes, and you just capture a bit of the scent on the wind as you walk through.
Absolutely, and they're so important for bees and things, aren't they? They're attracted towards all the scents.
Yeah, it's amazing how many bees you still see in the winter, so they need flowers now too. And we've got these lovely ground covers, the Iris unguicula and the Ophiopogon and the black grass.
Oh yes, these are lovely, aren't they? These little irises. You only get 1 or 2 flowers at a time, but there's such a joy to see them.
Yeah. And then the more foliage plants like the Mahonia, soft caress.
Yes, that's just going to come into flower, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right in the depths of winter. And what about these lovely coloured stems? These are great,
Yeah,
these cornices.
Cornus midwinter fire, and we've got some Annie's winter orange, which is really bright.
They really do look like they're on fire, don't they?
Yeah,
They really catch the winter dark light and grab it and make the most of it. And they're set off beautifully because you've mulched, haven't you?
Yeah.
To sort of really set off those coloured stems.
And then we've got all the winter stems of the trees. This is Prunus cerula,
Oh yes.
the white birches and the Betula nigra with their peeling bark.
I think it's so important to have even one tree in your garden. Makes such a lot of difference to the wildlife, doesn't it?
Yeah, they're brilliant. I mean, if you want to know more about the wildlife here, Dylan, our countryside manager, is the person to talk to. Would
Oh,
you
I'd love to meet him.
Yeah, shall I take you?
Yeah. Trees are such an important habitat for wildlife. Even in the winter, they can provide important places for insects to shelter, which in turn will feed the birds. But as well as the garden at Mottisfont, the wider landscape is a haven for wildlife, particularly here around the River Test, which has been designated a triple SI. Dylan, the countryside manager here at Mottisfont, looks after this important landscape.
Hello,
Hi,
Jane.
Dylan.
Hiya.
Shall we walk along the river? Because it's
Absolutely.
gorgeous, even though it's middle of winter.
The rivers always look lovely. We're very lucky. Looking after the middle reach of the River Test, 2.5 miles of the chalk streams in Hampshire. It's an absolute privilege of job.
What is the thing with chalk streams? Why is it so important?
They are so rare, and they're so under threat. They're so precious, so delicate. Some of the most characteristic species that the UK has reside and depend upon the river.
What sort of thing?
Like the salmon, and they're really sensitive to changes in climate, management, habitat. So actually they're considered a keystone species, which means that if we've got them thriving on our estate, they're indicative of a really much broader biodiversity and wildlife-rich habitat around the landscape. And actually some of those habitats that have been adapted from that management have needed to be changed to be more resilient to climate. Now the new climate changes come into effect and we're seeing more prevalence of that. So that's benefiting a lot of our wildlife species as well, because we can actually modify our rivers to reduce impoundment for migratory fish. We can increase our fringe management to incorporate fly life habitat for different mayfly and things like that.
Right. And how do you sort of set about that? I can't imagine it's just about breaking banks and letting it flood.
Absolutely not. It takes a huge amount of planning. We've been working very closely with the Environment Agency, Natural England and the Wessex Rivers Trust to do large-scale restoration works on our rivers to promote good habitat and good river inflow management, which promotes that fly life, the provision for the salmon and the trout that live in the river to actually put their spawning habitat in place, to get their reds, to make sure we've got future successional generations of those animals. Additionally, our fringe woodland around the estate is very rich in wildlife, including where it's internationally designated for its barberstale bat population. And the bats, they live in the woods, and in the night when they come out, they come straight to the river because this is where all the fly life is.
This is where all the food is. Yeah.
Absolutely. And with the wetland areas and the climate impact, hot summer days and really wet winters, we're finding that some of these areas are quite tricky to manage. So having those battery packed steel operated kit really helps us get on the ground and get the work done without.
You can get into awkward areas and you're travelling light.
And also, being battery powered, they're far better for the environment as well.
So Dylan, what can I expect to see when I come back in the summer?
Well, let's hope you get much better weather, some sunny conditions, a lovely gin clear river with the river vegetation growing in it, holding a lot of those wild trout, the juvenile salmon that have hatched over the spring months, pike, chub, deeper fringes of vegetation. So we've got holding a lot more dragonflies, damselflies, butterflies. And hopefully, something that was rarer maybe a decade ago, which I'm now seeing far more commonly, is the kingfisher. Let's hope we can get you one of those.
Oh, that would be lovely. I'd love to just catch a glimpse of that flash of blue.
Absolutely. Once you've seen one, you won't forget it, will you?
No, what a treat.
Yes.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Dylan.
you.
And thank you so much for joining us here at Mottisfont Abbey. I hope you've enjoyed a walk round as much as I have. And if you'd like to get a few more glimpses behind the scenes here at National Trust Properties, then subscribe to the STIHL GB YouTube channel.